Welcome to another episode of Conduct Detrimental. Dan Lust, Mike Lawson. We are spanning the world of sports. Last episode, we covered some NFL, but we knew. We heard you in the DMs, dropping in the replies. Why aren't you covering Miles Bridges? Why aren't you covering Casey Close? Why aren't you covering Dan Snyder's Yacht? Actually, nobody asked that last one, but special guests. We got 3 guests today, Mike, on a mega episode. Mike, been a while, my man. We got a lot to cover today.
There's a lot. It's a heavy week. I mean, the thing that happens is the intersection of sports and the law is just never ending. And there's so many things that we can't cover. So that's why we ask people to write on our website. And if you're looking for an opportunity to get involved, definitely write on our website. And if you think that we're not covering something, check our website because we probably still are covering it in some way, shape, or form.
See, the good news is that when sports law hits, we all get tagged, everything blows up. But you know, we all work full-time jobs here. It's tough to find time to record. So this week is a special 2-episode week, which we do fairly regularly. But this one particularly special. Also, Mike, you know, sometimes we get a lot of sports law, and also, you know, we have a great guest that you know, we had a lot of questions for Charles that went 50 minutes. So we had other topics to cover yesterday, but we're like, you know what? Let's let the Watson thing simmer, and then you know, the good news for our listeners, you know, that episode brought in a lot of new people. So if this is your second episode of Conduct Detrimental, having stuck around from Charles Robinson, buckle up because we got a lot of sports law to break down. Okay, here's the docket. We got 3 guests. We're going to bring on Matt Tympanick, who is our resident district attorney. He's going to break down the Miles Bridges 3 felony charges. 1's assault, 2 are child abuse. He's the leading point scorer for the Charlotte Hornets. We're going to break that down. Raymond was today. We're going to break down the Henry Ruggs latest updates in that saga, the decisions that are being made from a defense standpoint to try to defend the case, and the latest there, some substantive updates from the court. Next, Mike, one of the weirdest guests we've ever had on Conduct Detrimental. I don't know this man's name. I just know that he curates the Dan Snyder's Yacht account, and he follows Dan Snyder's Yacht around the country. He was giving out fun facts, which we'll get into, but the man has not done an interview yet, and he's supportive of all the stuff that we've done on the Washington front, you know, with our commander stuff. And the man wants to hold Dan Snyder accountable, and we got him on the show. So it was a weird interview, but he was a normal guy. Just a weird interview talking to a guy who does not want his name to be known. You know, jokes aside, like it was a little bit of a QAnon feel. He just like did not want to be known, but an interesting one. And last but not least, Mike, we spent a lot of time with the Freddie Freeman, Casey Close, Doug Gottlieb saga since our last episode. Doug Gottlieb got a hit with a libel lawsuit. So libel, fancy term for, you know, when you put defamation in writing. Slander is when you say it out loud. Obviously, a tweet is akin to writing. So Gottlieb is hit with libel. So we brought back on the man we had on to initially cover it, former Major League Baseball agent Josh Kusnick. We're going to talk about those updates in that case. We're also going to spend some time while Josh was here talking about that interesting story that came out about Juan Soto that declined 15-year, $440 million contract, Scott Boras, and really what goes to the mind of an agent, you know, when that type of deal gets leaked and goes public. So, you know, we'll talk about the art of the deal here. So a lot to break down. And before we get into that substance, Mike, we're about a week away from something very big. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Absolutely. It is still ingrained in my head of my experience with the bar exam. I'm not that far removed from it. And we have our fearless partner, Themis. You know, this podcast is sponsored by Themis. You've heard us talk about it for over a year now. And you know, the amazing things that they do, and we've been able to collaborate with them. And luckily for our listeners and everyone here listening, you've been able to, if you're studying for the bar, you've been using Themis, and you know, it's down to the wire here. Final week, use this to really get in your multiple choice practice. I know there's some strategies on your MPT, making sure you've got your timing down. Themis has you covered, absolutely. And if you're a rising 3L looking for a bar prep, you know, come the fall, that's really when you want to kind of try and decide what bar prep company you want to use, and definitely make sure that you check out Themis.
Mike, all good. And if you are a sports fan, you are not a lawyer, and Mike just said MPT and rising 3L, don't worry. Those are not in the final exam. Mike, last episode, as you know, I said I had this crazy thought. I might take the Florida bar, I might take California bar. I'm not sure what to do. Unfortunately, Mike, Themis listens to the podcast, and they are now holding me accountable. So this is not good. This is not good. I shouldn't say these things out loud, but joke aside, like if I do it, I'm 1,000,000% using Themis. Okay, so very busy episode today. We're going to cover a broad range of topics, so buckle in, get ready for some sports law. First up on the docket, some criminal law. The resident DA, Matt Tympanick. With that said, we'll kick it over to Matt. Joining us, Matt Tympanick, of the Tympanick law firm. How's it going, buddy?
Excellent. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. So, there's been two stories that have come up in the criminal realm in particular. So, you're our resident district attorney here. For those that don't know, Matt was previously a prosecutor. So we do like to have Matt on to talk about specific criminal issues. Okay, Matt, the two big ones in our world of sports law, Henry Ruggs and Miles Bridges. Pick your poison. Which one you want to cover first?
We can do Ruggs. I think it'll be more of something that's been going on a longer amount of time.
Okay, so brief racket on Ruggs, and it's in the news this week. A lot of people that have not been following the Ruggs case were caught up to speed. The ESPN Daily podcast covered that. ESPN Daily is not sponsoring the segment, but I do listen to that every day. It's definitely a good listen. So ESPN tells a story, and they do it in the way that only ESPN could, that Henry Ruggs that night is accused of driving, I think it's, Matt, 150 miles an hour?
It was, I think it impact 128 miles an hour.
Yeah, I mean, it's an insane speed, but ESPN tells the story and they speak from the victim's perspective. And again, it's a really heinous case. We have some fun on the show. This is not a story that we have fun with, but it's a story of a fatality involving a vehicle and driving at speeds in excess of 125 miles an hour. So, the man's life, right, his liberty is at stake. But what we do know, it's not contested, is that this incident cost someone their life. And, there was also a golden retriever in the car. It's a terrible case. People can look into the facts here, but from a legal perspective, I think there's two avenues that we need to talk about, right? The question that has come up in some of the reporting surrounding this case, that Ruggs' lawyers might potentially argue that Ruggs was not operating the vehicle on that day. So we'll talk about that. I see you're laughing. For those not watching a video, Matt is laughing. But the other one, right, is the admissibility of the blood alcohol test. And that's certainly the biggest update that we've had on that front. So Matt, the floor is yours. Let's go into the latest developments on the case.
So the latest development is, I think it was last week, there was a motion to suppress. So the prosecution was trying to admit evidence of Henry Ruggs' medical blood at the time, immediately after the incident in question. Defense is trying to keep that evidence out because his medical blood shows him over the 0.08 limit. When you have blood that is over 0.08, you are considered legally under the influence and impaired, unable to drive. What we know about the Ruggs case was, I think it was on Instagram story or something, or Snapchat. Henry Ruggs, prior to the incident, was at Topgolf, and then he got into his car with, I think, his girlfriend, who was also a victim in the case, and he was driving 140 miles an hour earlier, but at impact, they estimated about roughly 128 miles an hour when he rammed into a woman in front of him and set the car on fire. And obviously, she unfortunately died. The other individual part of this is Henry Ruggs' girlfriend, who was a passenger in the vehicle.
Allegedly a passenger, right? Because I guess
allegedly a passenger sustained serious injuries as a result of the incident. I wrote an article back in November for Conduct Detrimental, laying out what the prosecution's silver bullet would be. That would be his medical blood. In DUI manslaughter cases, usually the defendant's medical blood is necessary to be able to prove whether or not the individual was impaired at the time of the incident in question. Thus, way back then, that was a question. And now with the judge deciding that the search warrant getting the medical blood was valid, that evidence comes in. That poses a real issue for Henry Ruggs and his attorneys. Now, like I said previously, he had two methods to attack this case. One was to get the medical blood thrown out, which would allow a situation where it would just be observations about his impairment, and they wouldn't have an ironclad evidence of impairment. They do that now. So now the defense is going to be, okay, all right, maybe he was impaired, but he was actually the passenger in the vehicle.
Let's stop right here for a second, because again, I implore everyone to listen to the daily podcast or just read Matt's coverage on this, because Matt's all over the place. But, the element on this part, right, there is a pretty heavy motor vehicle accident, right? So Matt, from my prior life, I did a lot of insurance defense cases, a lot of auto cases, right? It's a pretty, a high impact crash. So what Ruggs' side is likely going to argue, right? And we'll see what push comes to shove if there is some type of resolution or some type of plea here, but that the observations, right, were of someone that just got into a very serious car accident. There is audio footage that I think, or video footage that TMZ put out, that Ruggs' girlfriend is saying he's concussed, he's out of it. And I think that's a reasonable perception. I don't know if that's actually the case. And maybe it's a little bit of both, right? Maybe he was a little impaired from the accident. But you go to Topgolf, and I remember seeing those videos with you, Matt. We discussed them on the pod once upon a time. There's alcohol in the background, or at least appears to be in some of those pictures. And we've all been to Topgolf, at least most of us have. It's a fun event. It's a bar scene. It's like
we're at my 30th birthday.
Here's the thing, right? Is it possible it's both, Matt? Could it be one or the other? But here's my question to you as our legal expert, our resident DA. Let's say it is a little bit of both, right? Let's say his perception and his impairment was increased because of the accident, but there are still traces of alcohol, right? Or his BAC is above the legal limits. What does that mean for Ruggs? Does that mean he's out of luck?
I think that this type of situation is there. I think it might behoove them now to seriously entertain a plea, and a plea that would send him to prison for years. The thinking being is blaming it on the passenger as the driver of the vehicle is what all they're going to have. And I don't know particularly if that's going to work considering everything that's been presented. I think he actually might make admissions to driving. So to turn around and say that the passenger is the driver is not something that's going to work with the BAC, with the high impact.
And the BAC, we should break it down, right? Blood alcohol content. Yeah. You and I are talking amongst friends, but we got to sometimes break it down.
Yeah. And that was over the legal limit. And when a jury hears about how the impact at 128 miles an hour roughly, and that individual hitting the car causes the car to catch on fire, and the victim, in this case, unfortunately dies from this incident. All of that, hearing to a jury, no jury is going to have any sympathy for Henry Ruggs. No judge is going to have any sympathy. This is not the type of case you try. If the BAC was excluded, that might be a different story. Then they have an impairment defense, and they don't even need to go into the other person was driving defense. Then his charge more is a vehicular homicide as opposed to a DUI manslaughter, which is far worse and could lead to Henry Ruggs doing up to a decade in prison, perhaps even more.
I mean, here's the thing, right? We should address this part, right? Like Henry Ruggs is likely never playing a snap again in the NFL. Even to the extent that he were able to work some type of plea deal here from the NFL perspective, I'm not sure it's one they could touch again, right? And I keep seeing Ruggs come up in different comparisons to Alabama wide receivers. And, it is what it is, right? Someone's life was tragically lost here. And I see people in my replies when I do post about Henry Ruggs saying, he should get a life for a life. Like you have some crazies on Twitter, but at the end of the day, you can't fault his defense counsel, right? I've worked briefly on the criminal defense side. I know that's, where you spent your career on the prosecution side, but like the guy's doing his job. He's working with the hand he was dealt. At this point, we don't know what the prosecution is offering as a plea, if they're offering anything at all. But, you can't lack the attorneys here for lack of effort. They're really going full throttle, and they're, dealing with the best hand that they're dealt. So people are saying if they throw the blood alcohol content out, does that mean that Ruggs wins? No, it still does not. You could still get an impairment without having any, without the BAC. You could still do it that way. But, Matt, anything further on the Ruggs case? Any different avenues for the defense to try or the prosecution to stick on?
Well, I actually think I read somewhere that the Henry Ruggs defense attorneys were arguing that the deceased victim's death was not casually caused by Henry Ruggs's actually hitting the car, that it was actually from an explosion from the car. Hopefully they don't actually explore that at trial, because that would be tone deaf in itself, and a jury, they would lose any and all credibility with the jury.
We discussed this. I was on another show recently, and I was explaining, like, somebody said, isn't that argument laughable? And I'm like, well, Matt, you're married just like me. Like I have a car in my name. My wife has a car in her name. I drive my wife's car a good amount, right? Like I have 2 little kids. Her car's better for the kids with the car seats and whatnot. Like, this is not a situation where kids were involved or you're borrowing one car, a different car. But remember, right to the point, and let's see what narrative is spun by the defense side here. But they were an event where the pictures in the video that we all saw on social media appeared to show alcohol in the background. So what is one logical reason, right, why Henry Ruggs' girlfriend would have been driving the car if Henry Ruggs was intoxicated? So there's also a version of events where his BAC is over the legal limit, and maybe the defense even concedes that. But they say he was not driving the car because he knew he was over the legal limit and he wanted his girlfriend to drive. I don't recall seeing anything on her BAC, right? Do we know what her condition was or anything like that?
No, I just know that she was injured from the alleged incident, like severely, and she will be testifying if this case were to go to trial against Henry Ruggs. And another avenue, even for the prosecution, is potentially get habit evidence of Henry Ruggs's propensity to actually, after drinking alcohol and driving, but also driving exceptionally fast. Speed is a huge factor in this case. If he hit her, if the deceased doing 50, 60 miles an hour, that probably lead to a fender bender, but it doesn't involve the entire car spontaneously combusting and exploding. And that's definitely something that prosecutions want to explore, to be able to eliminate any and all doubt that anybody but Henry Ruggs was the driver of the vehicle.
Okay, I think we can put a pin on Ruggs. We'll obviously keep an eye on that, Matt. You're our go-to guy for that. And for the next topic I'm going to give you. So Miles Bridges, we discussed this on the pod maybe a week or so ago. From the basketball perspective, Miles Bridges took a calculated risk. He was being offered a 4-year contract, upwards pretty close to $100 million. He turns it down because he wanted to get close to free agency, right? Or test the waters, as they say. So the Hornets, he's a fantastic. I don't want to say fantastic. He's a borderline all-star. He's a name that people know in the space, but he's someone that the Hornets said that, when they were quoted prior to free agency, were saying that they were interested in signing him to a long-term deal. Now, all of a sudden, Miles Bridges' NBA career is certainly in jeopardy. His next team is unclear, right? If he's going to get suspended from the league. But this all comes in the wake of his wife posting pictures online that showed alleged domestic violence between herself and Miles Bridges, a forward with the Hornets, and some I don't want to get too into the weeds, but some comments from Miles Bridges' children or child, I guess it was one, that spoke to some of these incidents. So that was all posted on social media. The dirty laundry was out, and then we were in wait and see mode as we saw what the prosecution or the prosecutor's office was going to do, what DA was going to assign here. So Matt, the news. Felony charges issued to Miles Bridges. Take it away. What's the latest on Bridges?
As we found out when this incident would happen, he was arrested, and he originally had a $130,000 bond. Like I said on Ruggs, I also wrote an article for this case for conduct detrimental. When I saw the bond, I was stunned how high it is. Usually this type of situation, even if there are felonies involved, $15,000 to $25,000 is roughly the range it would be. When I saw a bond of $130,000 with no criminal history to speak of, no failure to appears, and I've seen sexual assault charges with lower bonds than this. So when I see that bond, I'm like, the judge who set the bond had to have seen horrific facts. And by horrific facts, we obviously in the TMZ article, it talked about how the alleged victim needed medical attention. In domestic battery cases, it's relatively rare for the victim to actually need medical attention, as in go to the hospital, get stitched up, because a lot of the injuries don't usually make a mark, obviously the emotional injuries. But this situation, in this case, the victim had visible injuries. And I theorized maybe it was bruising or more likely bloody images of the victim, because that's what actually would get the bond. And as we saw in the post by the alleged victim, the victim had, it seemed, numerous stitches, fractured ribs, and part of the charges against Miles Bridges is child abuse. And these charges are exceptionally serious. And for them to file the case as quickly as it did, that is how seriously the LA County District Attorney has taken these charges.
So let's focus on what the charges are, right? So we have, the post on Instagram, you can look it up and people can find it if they want. But the actual allegation on Instagram, right, was assaulting her in front of their children. So the charges that come down, right, 1 felony count of injuring a child's parent and 2 felony counts of child abuse under circumstances or conditions likely to cause great bodily injury or death. So when the DA, we look at the press release, I'm just going to read the short excerpt. It says it includes an allegation of causing great bodily injury on a domestic violence victim. So Matt, that's what I think the obvious one, right? This is to Miles Bridges' wife. So the DA's release also noted that the children were present for the alleged assault, but did not otherwise specify what the child abuse count stemmed from. So could be 2 things, right? It could be a version where the child abuse count relates to abuse that occurs in front of the children. I think that's what the DA is alluding to. I haven't seen any indication one way or the other, if there actually is an incident of abuse on the children in the traditional sense. Matt, what are you hearing on that front? Are you familiar with what types of acts would constitute child abuse, even when not making any type of contact with the child?
In some states, it is an aggravating factor for a child to witness their parents in a domestic violence situation. In the state of Florida, if a defendant hits his wife in the presence of a child, that defendant must serve statutorily 5 days in jail because it's obviously in the presence of the children, and if there's visible injuries. In this case, we have, it looks, numerous injuries, medical records they're going to be able to point to. There's going to be no issue for the prosecution to prove that she actually suffered injuries. And if the kids actually witnessed this alleged incident, that evidence, what I can tell you from being both a prosecutor and a criminal defense attorney, is potentially damning for Miles Bridges, because kids usually almost never have any incentive to lie. And I think we actually saw in the video what Miles Bridges' child talking about, admitting and basically testifying on Instagram about how his father hit his mother. And when he's called to the stand, a jury's going to take that evidence and that testimony exceptionally seriously.
Let's dig in for a little bit, Matt, because we talked about, I think you said in there's some states that allow somebody to be charged with child abuse, even if they don't actually make contact with the child. So, we believe, they didn't say it in the press release, but our indication is that the section that he's being charged under is 273A. So that's child abuse, emphasis likely to produce great bodily injury or death. So just a brief summary, Penal Code 273A addresses situations where a person either endangers the safety of a child or inflicts, causes, or permits unjustifiable pain or mental suffering. So there's the word here that I want to focus on: endangers, right? So this statute speaks to someone potentially not making contact or not actually injuring a child, but you put them in great risk of bodily harm, right? The example that comes to mind, let's say we have no indication if this occurred or not occurred. And obviously the details provided by Miles Bridges' wife are, the mom, and I think that's probably for the best. We don't know exactly what happened, but in theory, right? Let's just say there was, I'm going to make up because this is a sports podcast, but let's say someone threw a baseball at someone as hard as they possibly could, and it struck that person, right? So there would be contact, but let's say the person threw the baseball wildly, or threw a table wildly, or threw a chair wildly, and it didn't strike a child, but it certainly was close enough to possibly do that. Matt, is that the type of incident that might suffice under the statute?
I believe it would be. We're almost in a Paul's graph zone of danger scenario where the children actually were present when this alleged incident occurred. And definitely, I think, based on what is being alleged, Miles Bridges had to put his children in fear of great bodily injury or death at a minimum. How he did that, that's going to be flushed out more. But he doesn't actually, under the statute, it says likely. It doesn't say shall, or it's the situation where there has to be definitive contact, I should say. In this case, I think it might be enough for them to be there and to be in the damage path of what Miles Bridges was allegedly doing to his wife and what he did potentially in the presence of his children. He, like you said, he could have thrown a chair. He could have thrown a basketball at something and as hard as he could from 5 feet away. And it absolutely, what we want to know is, what does the living room, bedroom where this alleged incident took place? Hopefully law enforcement went there and took photographs so they could what they would probably find is a room in complete disarray, trashed even, because what Miles Bridges' wife's alleged injuries, those aren't just you slap once or punch once. No, this is an incident. The allegations are believed to be true. Numerous punches, throwing around, pushing up against the wall, throwing the individual against the alleged victim against articles in the room. That's what we're likely looking at in this case.
So that's it. I mean, it's a big story. I think the arraignment is happening today. We'll see what comes of punishment from the league's perspective. But Matt, as you know, we've been covering, you and I covered the Bauer stuff very closely. We covered the Tyler Skaggs stuff very closely, Deshaun Watson. And for better or for worse, the NBA has been kind of immune to these high-level stories. Miles Bridges, leading scorer for the Hornets last year, was looking to cash it rich in free agency. He turned down the guaranteed money, which is maybe a story for another time, right? Juan Soto turned down that 15-year I think it was $440 million. Not to say that Juan Soto has anything like this, but life happens, right? You turn down a generational wealth like $100 million for Soto, $440 million. your careers as an athlete, professional athlete, you can make a lot of money, but it can all disappear very quickly. So the Henry Ruggs story, the Miles Bridges story, hopefully, not tragic telltale stories, but that's certainly what we're trending to with respect to both. Innocent until proven guilty. But in this day and age in the social media era, right, the allegations are bad, right? It's almost like guilty until proven innocent. So what we do here, as people have seen, we try to at least explain the charges. People can make their own conclusions as to who's right and who's wrong. But what we are not going to do here is come out and shame defense counsel for trying to make their argument. So we'll see who Miles Bridges takes on, and we'll take it from there. Matt, always a pleasure having you on, buddy.
Thank you very much. Always a pleasure.
I'm going to give you your plug. Tympanick Law. Matt, you've been on our show now for almost a year. In the process, you've gone from a smaller firm to open up your own shop. So you have any criminal issues, if you're over in Florida, Matt's a pretty good resource for all things down there. Matt, always a pleasure having you on, and you are always welcome back here.
Thank you so much, Dan. Always a pleasure.
You got it. So that was Matt Tympanick. You can find him on social media at Tympanick Law. As he says, don't panic. Call Matt Tympanick. Great handle. So yeah, Matt is he's got the prosecutor hat on. He can really break this down in a way that really no one in our sports law space does with that criminal background. So we love having him on. But we said it at the end, in our world that we live in real life, it's innocent until proven guilty, right? Beyond a reasonable doubt in criminal court for both of these cases. But you do have people that just say and Miles Bridges is a free agent, right? I don't know what his future is in the NBA, and people I guess that's it. Miles Bridges, Hornets aren't going to resign him. He's got no future. Let's see what the suspension is. But you got to leave it to these criminal defense attorneys to work their magic here. I work for Mark Garagos, who's one of the top criminal defense attorneys in the country. He's pulled some rabbits out of his hat. So, never say never on these. Sometimes, the strangest arguments, the evidentiary arguments, they'll help you a lot here. So don't count anybody out yet. Even though the Ruggs one might seem like it's over. Again, you have some arguments here that Ruggs wasn't driving the car. And if you can establish that, certainly that's going to be a big game changer. Mike, thoughts on Bridges or Ruggs?
The Bridges is something that just kind of shocks the conscience, right? When you see something like that, the news, obviously, like you said, innocent until proven guilty. I do some defense work in my practice as well. And this, especially just being a large caliber name, Miles Bridges is coming off a very good year. He averaged over 20 points a game. He shoots just under 50% from the field. He's 24, I think, going into a good contract year for him, right? He's a free agent. He had some good things going for him. And this is something that really affects his future. It's going to affect his career. So we've covered it with Deshaun Watson. Regardless of whether it's true or not, it's something that is going to affect your career. And it is something that teams usually want to avoid just because of the PR aspect of it. So it's definitely, we'll have to keep an eye on it and see what comes of it. But it's definitely, like I said, shocks the conscience, especially when you hear things like domestic violence and child abuse. Those are not lighthearted crimes, right? These are felonies. These are very serious charges. So we'll definitely keep you updated on it. And Henry Ruggs, it's interesting because it's developed. It's been a developing case, and you see a little bit of the criminal procedure aspect of it, the evidentiary purposes of whether or not they're going to allow the blood alcohol content, the blood test to come in or not. And that's a big aspect of it too. So we'll see how both of these play out. But Matt's great when he comes in and he can lay it, like you said, he puts a prosecutor hat on so he can lay it all out for you.
So when Matt comes in, for criminal cases, they're going to be pretty serious, and Matt does a fantastic job breaking it down, talking about criminal statutes, but heavy cases on the criminal side. So you do need someone delicate for those. Now, moving to a much lighter note. So our podcast, allegations are allegations, but you want people to be held accountable for them, right? I think part of the frustration on Dan Snyder as an NFL owner, right? The man is, at least the reports are out here, that he paid off a woman $1.6 million. It was a sexual assault, sexual harassment type allegation. No public shaming from Roger Goodell when it comes to Dan Snyder. So the guy kind of got off scot-free. So people have been frustrated with Snyder, when it comes to at least our criminal cases, right? If you're found guilty in a court of law, you take a plea, you're going to be held accountable. Not so much for Dan Snyder, no written report. So here's the thing, right? You can't really touch the guy. The guy's a billionaire. And we can't do anything about it as fans, as lawyers that are not suing Dan Snyder for anything. But what do we have, Mike? We have a man of the people, one man, put it upon himself to track Dan Snyder's yacht. And no, not just Dan Snyder's yacht, Dan Snyder's plane. And not just Dan Snyder's plane, Dan Snyder's 4 little mini yachts that are within this larger yacht. So You got 4 little mini yachts, big yacht, a plane. This man has taken it upon himself to track all of these things and let us know where he is, because Dan Snyder is dodging a congressional subpoena. So I reached out to this account on a whim. I don't know who's on the other side of it by any means. Their handle is at Dan Snyder's Yacht. This person is just tracking the yacht. So I reached out and I said, would you like to come on the show? Person comes on the show. You're going to hear the audio pretty well. We're not going to edit it at all. He has some issues with his voice. He does not want to be known. He knows Dan Snyder's litigious background, so he does not want his real identity out there. And he wouldn't even tell me it, not even offline. So I asked him about the impetus of the account and, maybe some clues he has on Snyder's whereabouts and maybe clues that he's picked up by literally following the man every single day like a private investigator. I don't think we need any more introduction here. This is Dan Snyder's Yacht, the man behind the account. We are joined now, first on Conduct Detrimental, a secret guest who will not reveal his identity. We are joined by the owner, the man, the person behind Dan Snyder's Yacht. What should I call you?
You can call me Mark.
Call you Mark. Is Mark your real name?
It's a nickname I've gone by.
You have quickly become at least my favorite Twitter follow in a very short amount of time. Your Twitter followers are skyrocketing by the minute. I'm looking. So I wanted to do my part to give you your platform to explain how this came to be. But before we get there, here's the question that our listeners are curious about. Where is Dan Snyder's yacht?
Dan Snyder's yacht is currently sailing up the coast of Italy to Monaco.
Okay, so we had Monaco, right? We were in France for a period of time. We were in Israel for a period of time. For those that are not following your account, you are keeping daily tabs on where Dan Snyder is. And it's relevant to our legal conversation because Dan Snyder is avoiding, we'll say avoiding or indirectly, directly, but avoiding being served with a subpoena to appear in front of Congress. So he's overseas and he's been there for a long period of time. You could probably speak to that. But, for our legal purposes, service, right? Service of process, getting served with legal papers. It's tough to do if you're not located in the state. It's tough to do if you know that if someone's trying to serve you and you're avoiding doing it. So, Mark, if that is your real name, why don't you talk a little bit about how this account got started, why you are keeping tabs on everywhere and anywhere Dan Snyder is, and a guy who's pretty litigious. So I don't know, power to you, keeping tabs on the guy, you're keeping him in check. But, maybe you're a little worried. I don't know. What's the story here?
Yeah, so it started about a month ago. Was homesick with COVID, as many people are, and was watching the congressional hearings. And so, there was a statement put out that Dan Snyder wasn't going to be able to make the hearing, was too busy, and that he was in France. And so based off of that, I was wondering, where is this guy? And so I had seen previous, yacht trackers from tracking Russian oligarchs. So I was wondering, could you do the same with Dan Snyder's yacht? And it turns out you can. There's a huge spread with the yacht's name, Libel 2019 when it came out. And so looking it up, the yacht was in Cannes, France, during the hearing. And so, just goes to show, while the hearing was going on, Congress was taking this seriously, Dan Snyder was on his yacht in the Mediterranean. And so I think that just goes to show you kind of the level of respect that he couldn't take, a few minutes out of his day to call into the hearing.
I love the backstory. And then I don't know who you are. I do see that you have a Capitals hat on and a Nationals shirt. So do I take it that you are a Washington fan that is maybe not so happy with Dan Snyder's tenure as owner of the Skins, the Commanders, whatever you want to call them?
Yeah, I grew up in the area. Been a fan of DC sports teams my whole life, but it's been a taxing last couple years, just with losing on and off the field, to quote Bruce Allen. There's been just scandal after scandal. You've had quarterback situations. You've just had so many, the whole sexual harassment allegations, the NFL investigating. There's been so little positive news for this team for the past year that I think, as many people, it's been a taxing time to follow the team.
Now, from your perspective, right, as someone that probably knows more about Dan Snyder's whereabouts than literally anyone in the world other than Dan Snyder, I've had a lot of fun with your account. You posted yesterday that you learned that Dan Snyder's yacht has 4 other smaller yachts. What can you tell us about Dan Snyder's yacht and maybe his trajectory? Do you see him coming home anytime soon? What can you tell us with your? I'm not really joking that you're kind of an expert in Dan Snyder's whereabouts. Like, what clues can you give us? Are his smaller yachts going to different places? What do you got?
Yeah, so you can track both his yachts and his jets. There's a great community of people that also track jets. And so they get around. FAA will hide data based off of the owner's request. And, amazingly, Dan has hidden his jet data. But a group called ADSB Exchange tracks jets, and so his jet currently went to Israel, which matches what his lawyer stated that he was going to be traveling to Israel, and his yacht is currently sailing to Monaco. So where actually Dan Snyder is hard to know, but my money would be on Israel. I think he stays in the Mediterranean on his yacht for the next month. We'll see if he comes home for a preseason game. That will be the fun day if he comes home, and if his jet comes home, maybe Congress can get a service processor to Dulles Airport.
I might burst your bubble here, but I do want your opinion on this, right? You know, at this point, Dan Snyder knows that people are following his yacht, right? So is it possible? I just want to throw it out there, maybe not plausible, possible, that Dan Snyder is not actually on his yacht, that perhaps he's on to the scent, he's on the old bait and switch. He is somewhere else, nowhere related to his yacht, but he's got everybody off the scent, and Congress is now, seemingly not trying to serve him. They're trying to serve their attorney, or his attorney, with legal papers through electronic means, because they think he's overseas. They think he's in Israel. They think he's in, Monaco. Is it possible that Dan Snyder is not on his yacht?
Certainly could be. He's got, I think, houses, a couple different houses. He's a billionaire. He's got places all over, I'm sure. We don't know his whereabouts. We can only track yachts and jets. But like I said, his jet went to Israel. But who knows where he is? He could be hiding on a island like a Bond-like villain. We don't really know.
So the jet is in Israel, but the yacht is in Monaco.
It's on its way to Monaco. It is sailing now.
And where's the jet?
The jet has parked in Israel. It hasn't moved in the past 2 days.
We have figured out something, my friend Mark, if that is your real name, or Bob, whatever you want to be called, right? There is a world here where Dan Snyder is running intentional interference. They don't know where he is. This is like, I have a feeling you're around my age, but like a little Carmen Sandiego action, right? We don't know where Dan Snyder is. He's got the yacht one place. He's got the jet the other place. He's got 4 little mini yachts. I think Dan Snyder is onto you. I think he's now decided to run some interference, right? Israel in the middle of all this. I'm not buying half these excuses. And also, mind you, and I'm going to get your thoughts on this, right? Like, at a certain point, we live in the Zoom era, right? It's beyond me why the man can't appear. If it's Israel, they have decent Wi-Fi, I'm told, right? Monaco, pretty good Wi-Fi. The yacht, I'm sure, has good Wi-Fi. I don't know. I mean, is there a reason that Dan Snyder is not just appearing? I mean, it's not really a legal question, but it seems like the man is just intent on running out the clock, maybe until November, maybe until some midterm elections. As the expert on this, do you have any thoughts on it?
Yeah, certainly seems to be the case. His yacht has an IMAX theater. I'm sure it's $180 million yacht. You can get Wi-Fi. Call up Elon Musk, get some Starlink going. He wants to dodge. I don't think it's a good look for him to answer questions. Roger Goodell, trained expert in answering questions. That's what he gets paid, $70 million a year to do. Dan Snyder's press shy. The last time he appeared to the press, he said Happy Thanksgiving in February, and that was his big press blunder. He didn't give any press conferences when the Commanders are renamed. He let everybody else do it. So I think he's press shy. I don't think he's media trained, and I think it would be a bad look. So his incentive is to sit on his yacht, enjoy the Mediterranean, have a few drinks, I'm sure, and wait till November.
I'm going to leave you with this, and I don't say this to warn you, right? I joked at the top that Dan Snyder is pretty litigious. I don't think you've done anything bad using publicly available information. No issues with that. What I do want to put on your radar, and I am judging by your face that you have not conceived of this, Dan Snyder is going to be called to testify at some point. We do think he's going to show up on July 28th, which is in a week or so. He's I'm sure going to plead the fifth. He's not going to answer anything of substance. At a certain point, right? Assuming Dan Snyder is called to testify, I think there will be a round of questions asking him about his whereabouts for the last month, 2 months, right? And right, there's always a version where Dan Snyder lies under oath. He gets hit with perjury. Those are never fun. But who might they call to verify where Dan Snyder has been in the last month? Mark, Bob, whoever you are, you might be on Congress's radar. Scary thought?
Happy to do my part in holding Dan Snyder accountable. Been a fan of the team for years, and it's just been downhill for the past 2 decades. So if that helps the women who have made accusations against him, we'll see what happens.
Well, we are in this podcast all about holding people accountable, telling the story. We've had some of the former employees on our podcast before to talk about it. And I saw somebody, a young entrepreneur, talking about you over here, trying to hold someone accountable and doing some good in your spare time. So I'm not going to ask you any identifiable questions. I don't want anybody to figure who you are, but we appreciate your efforts letting us know where Dan Snyder's yacht is. Mark, Bob, Dan Snyder's yacht, thank you for your service.
Thank you. And remember, Jerry Jones is a bigger yacht than Dan Snyder.
Fun fact.
Appreciate it.
So that was the person behind Dan Snyder's yacht account. I'm a little bit nervous. I don't want to reveal his identity, but interesting conversation. There were certain things that he asked me not to get into, to not reveal his identity, his job, his whereabouts, but certainly a fun conversation. So definitely follow the account. He's every day he's giving you fun facts about Dan Snyder's yacht. Now there's crazy people. He's posting some of these after we got off that are finding Dan Snyder's yacht in the middle of the ocean and tagging Dan Snyder's yacht, the account, and he's retweeting them. So there's now a movement of people in the middle of the ocean finding the yacht. I love it. I'm all for this.
All hands on deck.
All hands on deck. I like it. Final guest. I told you we had a loaded show today. Josh Kusnick's going to come on and talk baseball agency. The two biggest controversies there. It's Casey Close. It's Freddie Freeman. It's Scott Boras. It's Juan Soto. It's the Braves. It's the Nats. We're going to get into all of it with Josh Kusnick. Josh Kusnick is back on Conduct Detrimental. It's probably your third appearance in the last couple of weeks, which means you're doing something well. So the update in the Casey Close, Freddie Freeman, Doug Gottlieb saga obviously hit an official bump, we'll say, on Friday. Casey Close files a lawsuit in New York federal court suing Doug Gottlieb for libel, which is the fancy way of saying defamation, but written as in a tweet. So, Josh, you were on our show once upon a time, and you said, I remember you had an interesting conversation. You said, who would have told Doug Gottlieb that? And you surmised it was Alex Anthopoulos. But your gut here was that the Braves said that. And you said, you can't, I'm paraphrasing, but you can't trust anything out of the team's mouth. So, Josh, the floor is yours. Your thoughts on now that we actually have a lawsuit. I know you're not the lawyer, but as someone that's dealt with the teams, media, I think you're a good person here.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. And thank you for having me. I have unique experience personally with all of these people. Alex Anthopoulos and his behaviors towards agents. I can't speak to all of them. I can just speak to how he treated me while I represented an all-star. And it was very similar to what I have heard Casey Close express in the media from what he has said that he is a victim of. So do I believe him based on the circumstances? Yeah. Do I believe most agents? No. But in this context, it would be shocking to me if Casey Close built up all of this goodwill in his career, from Derek Jeter to Freddie Freeman to all these all-stars, where you've never heard a tinge of a scandal from this man, ever, within the industry. Even on my side, this was a guy behind the scenes that commanded respect from other agents, even begrudgingly from people like me. But the guy was a pillar of the agent world. Now, behind the scenes, do I know specifically what happened? No. But in context of what he is dealing with, if he is filing this lawsuit in federal court with discovery and all the stuff you get to talk about, he ain't playing around. My guess is that Doug Gottlieb made a very poor decision as a media personality. It is my guess someone from the Braves. Oh, sorry.
Let me leave you here, because we could speculate all we want, but let's talk about what is kind of like required in this, right? So, to your first point, Josh, that you raised, like, would Casey Close do this? Would he not do this? From a legal perspective, right? In terms of defamation, here's the one word that matters here: the truth. If what Doug Gottlieb said was true, whether he didn't source it correctly, he half-sourced it, he one-sourced it, whatever term you want to use, if it turns out to be true, Doug has nothing to worry about by any way, shape, or form, right? That's number one. In the course of this case, and I gave a quote to The Athletic earlier this week, and I was explaining, like, who is the central figure in all of this? Yeah, Casey Close. It's, I guess it's him. It's Doug Gottlieb. He said, she said, whatever you want to say. But Freddie Freeman is really the only person, if you read that tweet, right? It's what Freddie Freeman knew, why he fired Casey Close, what Casey Close knew about what would lead Freddie Freeman to fire him, right? Those are only things that really Freddie Freeman can speak to, all four of those points. So certainly, right, Doug Gottlieb's going to be asked about who his source was for this story. So on a short aside, Doug Gottlieb's caught between a rock and a hard place. He either has to out his source, which, would leave Doug Gottlieb as not the most reliable person in media circles. I doubt he'd be getting any scoops moving forward. Or on the other hand, he doesn't give his source, and then, right, he can't really defend the case. So he had to heard it from somebody. Doug Gottlieb's certainly not going to say, I made this up, in which case it's almost a per se version of defamation. So let's kind of dig into this, right? Doug Gottlieb's caught in a rock and a hard place. Doug Gottlieb's got the truth as an absolute defense. But the real question here, right, unless it's true, he made it up, there's shades of gray in the middle, right, is the fun part I want to get into with. The question of whether Casey Close is a public figure. Josh, in your circles, you as a former agent here, Casey Close is well known to you, he's well known to me. But in the law, there are two versions of a public figure. There's a general public figure, that's like Oprah or Barack Obama or someone that's just like really, really famous. right? Then there's a limited public purpose, right? That someone becomes a public figure. That's someone that's thrust themselves into a controversy, or someone that everyone is talking about, that maybe that person is now vaulted up to the level where they're a public figure. So we saw the comments from Derek Jeter. We saw a lot.
But I have a question. I hate to cut you off. I have a question. What if Casey Close is now a public figure thrusted into the media solely by Doug Gottlieb's negligence and actions, hypothetically?
So if that's the case, which is certainly what Casey Close is arguing right now, and you as the former agent, I'm sure you're biased a little bit toward this perspective.
Yes, I am.
Somebody can't write a story about somebody and all of a sudden now they're famous because of that defamatory story. But in the middle of this, right, shades of gray, Derek Jeter propped him up, right? And then there's also the statements that he put out, that Excel Sports Management put out. And there's also the fact that in sports circles, Casey Close is pretty well known. Certainly he's not Oprah or Barack famous, Barack Obama, right? You can't say Casey and people know who you're talking about. That's probably a good barometer. But there's shades of gray. In the world that we live in 2022, there are more public figures than there ever have been. So that's the argument that's going to come.
But is for what Doug Gottlieb is doing, like in sports journalism, I finger quotes, is Casey Close a public figure in a limited scope? Is there such a thing as a public figure in an industry or in a limited scope that would cover this? I'm curious as a former agent.
Well, think about it, right? And obviously you are asking because this situation could have easily happened to you, Josh, with with some of your comments at certain points.
I've been in libel lawsuits personally. We've discussed off air.
We do not discuss it on air, but
I'm happy to allude to it.
You're happy to allude. People can Google Josh, or you're happy to do that.
They can. I hope they do.
So here's where things get interesting, right? Who was Doug Gottlieb writing that tweet for? He was writing it for baseball circles, right? He didn't provide the context that, Buster Olney had provided the week prior. I think he was the one that originally broke that story.
Yes.
Yes. Writing for a baseball audience of people that, he didn't say Casey Close, agent of Clayton Kershaw, agent of Derek Jeter. He assumed his audience knew who Casey Close was. So certainly that's going to play a role. It's not, you can't just thrust someone themselves into the story, but there are shades of gray here. I don't think it's open and shut.
I would argue, though, in the world, I don't think any agent is a public figure beyond any other influencer with like a social media following. And then you really got to start digging into your side of like the laws got to get updated and changed for this new world. And eventually they will. But in a situation like this, as things stand today, from my perspective as an agent, you take the juxtaposition of the tweet from Olney originally, you compare it to what Doug Gottlieb did afterwards, and you look at both of them, and maybe they both had the same motivations behind it. But as much as I personally dislike Buster Olney's work, literally every single thing that man does is bad for work. As a person, he's entertaining. But my point is he's at ESPN. He has his standards for that. And I'm not saying Doug doesn't have different standards or hasn't worked at it, whatever. My point is that one handled it with care and one seemingly handled it like a TMZ story that led to this.
Yeah, in this day and age, and I go on Fox Sports, so I don't want to slander and obviously with the nature of these lawsuits, I don't want to say
no, that's not my intent. No,
but the point being, in this day and age, with Deshaun Watson stories and Casey Close stories and Trevor Bauer stories, whatever we cover on this, there are people in the space, and I don't want to name anyone good or bad, but that hear a rumor or hear something and will wait to find out if that source is double, triple, quadruple verified. And they'll sit on what could potentially be a big scoop. Happens a lot in with trade rumors with guys like Windhorst and Woj. I've listened to them do interviews. They hear something, but they sit on it until they know for sure. So sometimes
you have to sit. You have to sit. You have to.
To the point, just from a media perspective, sometimes you sit on the story at the risk of losing the story, but you sit on the verifiability because you've been around the block. I'm not saying that. Just let me close this point. I'm not saying that Doug Gottlieb didn't do that. But for purposes of this story, right, this is the really interesting point, and I alluded to it at the top. In order to defend himself, Doug Gottlieb does kind of have to out his source here. It's going to be very difficult. He's going to have to do it. And I say source, maybe there are sources, plural. He's going to have to out them. So Gottlieb, who is, he's a radio host. I've been on Doug's show before. I don't have anything bad to say about the guy, but he is now caught in defending a libel suit versus maybe losing the credibility of anyone moving forward that he could potentially get sued or that he's an easy target to get sued, right? There's also part of this. So yeah, I mean, it's too early to tell what's going to happen, but I will point the one thing that is not unheard of, but a lot of people threaten, and a lot of people write statements like Casey Close did. We will threaten legal action. We're going to explore this to the fullest possible legal extent. If you read the lawsuit that's filed here in New York federal court, it says that Doug Gottlieb had a conversation with someone at Excel Sports Management. And I think the term that the complaint used, that Doug Gottlieb, allegedly admitted to parachuting into the situation, that he, at least it's inferred that he might have heard something and took to Twitter very quickly. So not just the sourcing is relevant here, the timing in between the time he heard it and the time that he tweeted. So Josh, to the point that you were just bringing up about Woj and Windhorst and all these guys, the period of the incubatory period, how long you wait on it, it's all relevant. So again, don't want to speak ill of Fox Sports or Doug, but those are the questions that are going to be asked in this case.
And just to tag on, I had covered years ago, personally, I wrote for Baseball Prospectus, and there was a wave around 2014 of teenagers going on Twitter trying to break stories outside of the mainstream. Now, one of the kids, or two of them, Robert Murray, who was at The Athletic, who grew up into a very bad baseball journalist, in my opinion, and then Chris Cotillo, who is a very good baseball journalist. I love Chris's work. They both came up as kids, took alternate paths. One cut corners, one didn't. Anyway, I don't mind talking bad. My point is, though, to penetrate that market is a hard thing to do. And when you have a guy like Woj, or you have somebody else at the top, Schechter or Passan, they're at the top for a reason, because they're judicious on what they release, and they are rarely wrong. Ken Rosenthal too. But when they make a mistake, they come back, they admit it, and they have the mea culpas, all of them. And people give them the benefit of the doubt when they screw up because of all the goodwill they built up over the years. So when you have someone potentially like Doug Gottlieb parachute in, like you said, and just say something, not every tweet is equal on Twitter. When Jeff or Ken says something, that's one thing. Doug Gottlieb saying something seemed, in the context of what Freddie Freeman was doing, very opportunistic. And it seemed very damaging to the agency because they have other clients in Atlanta. And it's just overarching. If you don't know, how do you say something like that in media and then expect to not have to give up your source or just take the L in the lawsuit? This guy is in a rock and a hard place, and I don't think his journalism career will ever be the same after this, but it's because of his actions. I don't feel bad.
Yeah, and it's an important point, because in this day and age, and I know, you can talk about any number of people that will, if something is in the public realm, people can say this just happened or this breaking, whatever, but there is a contingency, and I see it happens maybe, I want to say once a month, where a very big story is broken, that there might be shades of truth to it, but it's not necessarily that person's story. So
yes,
let's see, right? Buster Olney reported it, and he's with ESPN. Doug Gottlieb's with Fox Sports, so there might be shades in the middle, right? Is it possible, right, that Doug spoke to somebody who wasn't comfortable reporting, but that Doug was comfortable reporting, and that Doug didn't even speak to anyone directly? All possible.
Well, don't leave this out too. Whoever the source was, whomever it was, didn't only talk to Doug Gottlieb. They probably called Jeff Passan, Ken Rosenthal, everyone at MLB Network, went through the list, and they're all like, yo, what you're telling me doesn't add up. Because if you're asking me pragmatically, just in a vacuum, did Jeff Passan and Ken Rosenthal whiff on this and Doug Gottlieb had it? If you're asking me to believe that after 19 years in baseball, no. What it tells me is those two guys passed on this because it's probably insane, and they let someone else do it, and now they're laughing at the consequences. I don't want to speak for people that I've worked with like that in the media, but contextually, that is how it looks to me. It looks like the smart people avoided it and someone ran with it.
So I'm going to give you one more thing, that I want to get into some stuff with Soto and whatnot, but
sure,
I'm going to plant the seed here, which is an interesting one. I guess we as lawyers, the lawsuit's filed and there's a period of discovery, and I'm just trying to figure out what the types of questions could be being asked to Doug Gottlieb, and really what Casey Close is going to ask in discovery and whatnot. So there was a story that popped across my feed, I don't know, probably, let's see, it's a couple of months back. So I go on a radio show in San Diego, a couple different hosts, but I go on with Rich Ornberger, who's a former NFL player. So there was a lot of buzz back in early 2022 about, the Jackson Mahomes, Patrick Mahomes, NFL, the famous brother of Patrick Mahomes.
I remember that.
So, well, don't spoil the lead here, because I'm sure our listeners have not. But there was, Rich Ornberger said, he heard from a source that Jackson Mahomes and Patrick's wife, I think her name is Brittany, is going to be banned from the
Brittany.
sidelines, and Patrick had a sit-down conversation with her, and that tweet went viral. Rich Ornberger is a good guy. He blue check mark Twitter. And he's a big name, in the field. That went viral, and it turned out that tweet came from a nobody, like not just it was like a fake source. Somebody scammed Ornberger and he apologized, and he said it happens, which it does. It happens to the best of them, and he apologized for it. But a lot of different people got that same text, and it was somebody out to try to really get the story out there. But it was a hoax. It was a catfish, whatever you want to call it. So, while we were talking about who the source was, could it have been a different sport reporter who gave it to Gottlieb? Could it have been the Braves? There's also a version where it was none of the above, right? So let's just put that out there, right? There are, as much as Josh, you and I are good people, there are bad people in the world that are out there just to lay a trap for Doug Gottlieb. So
There's a lot of Twitter troll accounts that, to me personally, are hilarious. Personally, with my comedic sensibilities, seeing some of these make me laugh. And you know what? I think it's ridiculous. I want to take a second to defend the actual trolls that do it comedically, to kind of turn those people on their head like the Joker. It's insane to me that any blue check mark in sports media would be so irresponsible and lazy to take an unverified tip in a DM or a text or a tweet and then be like, you know what? I'm going to run with this. They don't even hear how it sounds out loud. Let's just say that story might have been true. Do the reporters just absolve responsibility of themselves and be like, you know what? It sounds true. I'm just going to tweet it, because they get so caught up in the engagement and the clicks and they don't think. And again, the cream rises to the top. Very rarely do you see a scandal from the Mount Rushmore of people like Ken, Jeff, the ones I keep bringing up in baseball, because they don't do those things. If they got an anonymous tip from somebody on the internet, they would laugh at it or not even look at it. If they got a tip from me down the line somewhere, and I didn't have it sourced myself, they would laugh at me. So over the years, any reporter, I would learn never to call them unless I knew, because every good reporter knows if I'm calling them without dope and I don't have dead to rights what I'm doing and I can't prove it, then they know I'm pushing an agenda and they ignore it. Only the bad writers push agenda stuff, and every agent and the PA knows which one of them we can all manipulate. And unfortunately for Doug Gottlieb, he made some bad choices, seemingly.
So again, all allegedly, all whatever, but we're just talking about what could have occurred here, and we'll see. But I do want to point this out. A lot of people threaten defamation. Much fewer, far fewer, actually do it. You can get into the weeds. I'm not
right.
Legal advice, but
I can't stress this enough. I've done it personally. Google it.
Yeah, I again, we give some opinions here, but for pure legal advice, depends on the state that you're in. But if you file a case that is frivolous, that you know that you are not correcting, right? Let's say here, Casey Close knew that he did the thing. He knew that he held it back from Freddie Freeman, and he went ahead and filed that defamation suit. There's a lot of, we'll say, countermeasures that could be very expensive for filing a frivolous litigation. So the fact that Casey Close did it is certainly a reputation protector, but certainly important to look into.
Does any of this rise to the level of the penal system or criminality at all, or is it just civil?
No, this is all civil. I haven't heard anything that gets to criminal. But while I have
just asking,
in our time remaining, there's a story that popped across my radar, and I thought of you. And when I reached out to you, obviously had some strong thoughts on it as well.
Yes.
Okay, the winner of the home run derby, Juan Soto, convenient timing for him to win the home run derby. Reports trickle out that the Nationals are, I'm not sure if the deal is still on the table, had offered a contract, a long-term contract extension, taking Juan Soto to the ripe old age of 38, 15 years, $440 million with an annual average value of 29 and a third. So Juan Soto, one of the top players in all of Major League Baseball, represented by Scott Boras. It's an oddity. It's a complete oddity that is leaked out there. As we're talking about media and agents and players, it just seemed like this story hit a lot of the same notes as the Freeman one. So I'll give it to you. What are your thoughts on it?
I would be very happy to explain this and translate this so we can have a nice 60-second clip on Twitter for this part. So it is unbelievable to me that offer got out the way it did in the media and has the traction that it does. I know Scott Boras a little bit. I know Juan Soto tangentially. And I know from years of working against Scott, the thing that he values above all else is the average annual value of the deal within the hierarchy of Major League Baseball. In my opinion, Scott is the kind of person that would rather have a 2-year deal for $100 million versus a 20-year deal for $1 billion, because the AAV is what it is and he can sell that. Good for him. That's his model. My point is, the Washington Nationals clearly have engaged with Juan Soto's representation for a good period of time. I would go for at least a year in my estimation. And in that year, I promise everyone listening, there has never been a scenario in which Scott Boras has expressed $30 million a year annual value would have ever been passable. There's no scenario, however many years they want to defer, that deal ever happens. So my guess is that ownership reached an impasse on their side of what they were willing to go to on this particular player, and now have decided to go scorched earth, which is hilarious to me, because how do they expect to get the best trade package possible for a player such as Soto, who comparatively, since he started at his age, is only compared to guys like Frank Robinson, Ken Griffey Jr., go to Baseball Reference, all Hall of Famers. This guy is Ted Williams. But how do you trade that guy for full value to, say, the Yankees for a guy like Anthony Volpe or Jason Dominguez when you know you have to pay this guy $500 million? We saw what Ken Griffey got traded for in his career. We saw what Miguel Cabrera got traded for. The Nats are setting themselves up for failure here. And in my opinion, it would just be smarter to sign the good player you have built the team around. There's no salary cap. And it is absolutely insane to me that Juan Soto has to go pay for his teammates when his owner's a billionaire. Screw that.
Yeah, I was with a bunch of people this weekend, and the topic of, not all lawyers, but the topic of conversation is, how could Juan Soto turn down $440 million? The conversation wasn't over 15 years. It wasn't over 10 years. It was just $440 million. So that's the number that's leaked. And to your point, Josh, right? Like, I don't know, let's say it's a $440 million contract, but it's over 100 years. All of a sudden, that doesn't look as good. Let's say it's over 1,000 years. So either way, right? If you're getting $440 million, it's generational wealth. Like if it's over 1,000, we're certainly in a Bobby Bonilla type situation. But either way, it's a lot of money to turn down. But it's not as much money as you think in baseball circles with an average annual value when you have guys like Aaron Judge who are going to be commanding in that same vicinity, who are older than Juan Soto. So you have to keep it in that vicinity. So listen, we've covered baseball arbitration on this podcast. We cover contract disputes all the time. But it's a little bit of dirty pool to say, hey, we reported 15 over 440. And it makes Juan Soto look like the bad guy to say that he turned down 440, which may or might not be true. But the point I want to give you here, right? There's a report coming out that at least some people are thinking that Soto might get dealt before this year's trade deadline, that he's actually an active candidate to get traded. Now, Josh, you're the agent here. Now, in this scenario, obviously there's some bad blood between the Nats, Soto, and Boras. Do you think this leads to like the eject button being pressed? What's the likelihood of a trade here?
I mean, no. I mean, he's going to get traded in the offseason. I mean, unless the Yankees call it off for Volpe and Dominguez, or the Dodgers off. I mean, it just...
You don't think
how do you give,
as bad as the blood matters, that increases the trade likelihood, right? That would be my guess. I don't
know. I mean, it really big picture. I don't want to like micromanage this one, but I have to. Like Soto, it's, you can't compare this trade scenario to any other one, even though I just kind of did, which is comparing like pineapples and oranges, whatever. Like the big thing with this is that ownership in Washington might be like they might be selling the team. Ted Leonsis may buy the team. The Lerners may not be there anymore. So you have to figure out if the ownership group now knows who they're selling to, then that owner is going to have a big say on how this proceeds. Does he want Juan Soto and then he signs him? If it's a guy like Mark Cuban, if he gets the team, which MLB will never approve, he'd sign Juan Soto. If it's another owner, is he going to direct this ownership group to trade him? So the first thing the new owner does isn't trading Juan Soto. So like there's so many variables. And honestly, I know fans will probably hate to hear like the curtain coming back on WWE here. There is no bad blood. No one freaking cares. No one cares. There's a lot of profitability and defeat in baseball. Like how many Scott Boras clients are on the Nationals? Like Strasburg, Scherzer was there. No one cares. Money comes and goes, and fans who like look at, there's bad blood, they hate Scott Boras. No, they don't. The Lerners gave Scott Boras more money than any team in baseball the last 10 years, literally. So maybe they're fed up with it, but the big picture is they just want to sign Juan Soto as quickly as possible, as cheaply as possible. And Boris's job to get him signed as quickly as possible for the most money possible. And that's where the impasse happens. And you know what? Boris is going to win this. Whether he's traded or not, this dude's getting $500 million. And at some point, the Nats are going to wake up and realize any package they get will diminish the value of their franchise. It'll diminish their ability to, to compete on the major league at the major league level. And all it will do will punish a farm system. So you're going to have like the Florida or the Miami Marlins North. And if that's what they want to do to their franchise, that's great. But what Scott Boras has done is this is a franchise value level asset. Anybody who gets this player, their franchise value will increase. Well, you're not just looking at RBIs with this guy.
Let me jump in, Josh, as we're short on time. As we record today, their record is 31-63. We talked about the Aaron Judge situation last time you were on when the Yankees were winning. That's certainly very important. But the team that's losing, right, and they're trending it's a little bit of a nosedive, I think a trade is maybe, I don't want to say more like it's likely. I think it's more likely if the Nats were competing for a World Series, in which case I think the parties would figure it out. But we will see. Josh, in our remaining time, I want to wish you a belated happy Bobby Bonilla Day. I know you're doing a lot of fun stuff with the NFT business. Give yourself a quick plug on the way out.
I'm supposed to be in Houston the 28th to open somewhere with Sarah Sherman, I hope, at the Secret Group. But I don't know if I'm going to be there because I might be in Atlantic City for the National Baseball Card Convention. I got my Facebook page, Autograph Rookie Cards for Sale, which is a group that I'm really busy on, and then my Instagram and Twitter and TikTok and all that good stuff. And nursing a bruised coccyx right now, so sitting down for lunch will be hilarious.
That's a good injury with a last name like Kusnick. If you want to find
Kusnick, Coccyx.
I got you. If you want to find Josh on social media at Joshua Kusnick. Always a pleasure, buddy.
Yep, Dan, you rock. I got a lust for justice after this show.
Appreciate it. Okay, Mike, I got a hypothetical for you. I offer you $440 million. And I don't tell you what, just $440 million. And I say you have to accept yes or no. That's it. What are you saying?
You got to take it. I mean, these $440 million. Jeez.
So it doesn't matter what I could be asking you.
Third of that, a tenth of that.
See, it's interesting, right? Because I don't know, if I could say, Mike, you're jumping off a building, your insurance life policy is not going to pay off that amount. There's very few things in life that are going to earn you that amount of money. Yet Juan Soto, and I'll see what your thoughts are here, Mike. Juan Soto's turning that down. Josh's point, which is an interesting one. But Scott Boras, it's not about the money, the 440 that he's annoyed about. He's annoyed that he's locking his client into an average annual, average contract per year of $29 million. With television money coming in, that contract might look really bad. I remember years ago, right? I think Evan Longoria signed some crazy contract that was I don't know, it's 30 million, it's 28 million, is right around there, but it was thought of as a good deal at the time. And then the market shifted. And then that was all of a sudden one of the worst contracts in baseball. And that happens. So to lock someone in for 15 years, it's a long time. So I get the point. So maybe Soto wants some more flexibility, but geez, turning down 440 million, it's a lot of money, especially I don't know, anything could happen. Mike's okay. Let me, now you're our baseball guy. You're wearing your Yankee shirt. What does the average annual values look like? Do we have guys worse guys earning more than 29 mil a year? Is it that egregious that God forbid Juan Soto could make $29 million a year?
Well, I think let's talk about the years first. 15 years is a lot, right? He's 23 years old. That's his career. That puts him to 38 years old. No opt out. Well, we don't know the details. I mean, if there was an opt out or something like that, maybe I've been listening a lot of podcasts talking about this, of people talking about, well, maybe there should be a 7-year opt out or something like that, after 7 years. But yeah, the annual average value, AAV, that's a big thing that people talk about. Boris has talked about it for years, but you think about the first player, well, not the first player, but one of the biggest names to, he walked so these players could run is A-Rod. And that was a Boris guy. A-Rod got a 10-year, $275 million deal. And that AAV, which was back in 2008, is 27.5. So Juan Soto in 2022 now is getting only 1.5 million more per year. Now, is Juan Soto a better player than A-Rod? I don't know, but he's 23 years old. But the AAV is a big deal. 15 years it's a lot to spread it out. So if he's looking at a contract, is probably, if it's going to be a career contract, you're probably looking at somewhere in the realm of 10 years. But you talk about the names that are in the high AAVs who are over the threshold of 30, right? You have your big names, which are the pitchers, right? Max Scherzer is the highest right now. He's at 43 AAV. It's just unbelievable. Also, the 440 million, before I get into AAV, 440 million, that would be the largest contract in Major League Baseball history. Total value, that is surpasses it by a lot. Mike Trout is 426, 427 was his. So that's a lot. That is a massive amount of money. But like I said, Max Scherzer, who's kind of getting paid twice because of his deal that he got with the Mets. So he's 43. Garrett Cole is 36 AAV. Mike Trout's 35.5. Carlos Correa's 35.1. Strasburg's 35. Right. Rendon. Like these are your top ones that are well over 35 AAV, right? So comparable players to Nolan Arenado, Corey Seager, they're both at 32.5.
Point being that is like Juan Soto is a transcendent player. And when you know Scott Boras, who wants to reset the market constantly. So 440 is a lot of money to be paying someone until their age 38 season. But I think Boras is saying we're worth more than that. And I have a player that's capable of resetting the market. So 440 over 15, I don't think it's resetting the market. I mean, it's a lot of money, but there's no deals that reset the market in terms of overall like bulk value. You have guys like Scherzer, right, with that huge short-term deal, but a lot of money per season. So I get it. And then Josh has an interesting point, at the end too. Like, I don't know, like, maybe people like me and you, Mike, were thinking, hey, Soto's definitely going to get traded any day now. But, I think Boras is going to do what's best for him. He's going to take advantage of this, and maybe he's going to test the market as best as he can and try to find the team with the biggest pockets before, they say that they actually want out of town. But we'll see, Mike. Maybe he ends up in the Yankees, as all these players tend to. It's Stanton's, Judge. It's very problematic.
Yeah, I don't foresee him ending up on the Yankees. I mean, they'd have to obviously it'd be a trade, right? Well, here's the thing too. Soto he's still within arbitration, I believe. So, I mean, his eligibility would be locked in. I guess he would have to have it. He would have a say in the trade, but I think if they dump him for an entire farm system, what are the Yankees going to trade their entire AAA team for Soto unless they want some active players?
Like they don't we talked about this on the Kevin Durant stuff, like, I don't know how long ago at this point, but like baseball arbitration is a separate animal. Like the Nats don't have to do anything, right? Yes. Like they could trade him if they want, but there were some reports coming out, like he might be traded within the next 15 days. It's like the Nats don't have to do anything. And that's the good and the bad of the baseball system. Like you are not a free agent in the same way that you are in the other sports. Like you have to go through the arbitration process for many, many years where you don't have that level of control. Just like, we spent a lot of time with the Judge case talking about it. But it's what it is, Mike. If Soto got traded, I can't imagine, I can't envision a trade like that. I don't know what precedent.
It might have to be multi-team. There could be a lot of moving parts. I mean, there's always rumors about teams who actually has the depth to make the trades, like the Mets, I think the Dodgers, the Yankees, and there might have been another team in there. But another issue too for a player like Soto, right? He's looking at his career and obviously average annual value, but think about like 15 years, that's his entire career. He doesn't want to end up like Mike Trout. He doesn't want to be on a team that's just constantly losing. I mean, he's a young kid who wants to win, right? Trout's a 3-time MVP. He's had success in the league, but no postseason success. He's got Ohtani, who's an MVP, right? They're paying them a lot of money. No postseason. So what at the end of the day, what's your average value worth if you're not winning championships? He's got to be coming in with that mindset.
So I'm smiling here, Mike, as we put this long episode in the books. It's funny what sports law is. Like I've always had this definition, and I should mention I'm starting my sports law class at New York Law School in like a month and change. And I tell people the first day of class, like sports law is not what you think it is. It is not like being an agent or being the general counsel for a team or being a commissioner. Sports law is kind of like anywhere and everywhere. Think about what we're talking about. We're talking about Major League Baseball arbitration. We're talking about, agents working a deal, like lawyers work deals too, just a matter of what the clients are. We're talking about criminal cases. We're talking about Dan Snyder testifying in front of Congress. Like, I've been around the sports law space now for almost a decade. And like, I just, and I obviously teach the history of sports law. Maybe it's the social media era, but like, I don't remember a time with this many issues percolating, like across all these different sports. So it's great for us, and it's great to bring in a new audience and have people, learning about the law through sports. That's really all we're here to do. I listen to a ton of podcasts, Mike, as you know. I listen to way too many podcasts, and I don't just say this. Like, this is a great era for content in terms of sports law, sports business. If you're a sports fan, we're literally in the dead zone of sports right now. It's just baseball, and like the hot stove is as hot as it's ever been in terms of sports law. So yeah, I guess power to us. And Mike, as you said early on, like you want to contribute to our site in some way, shape, or form, we have just hit the 1-year anniversary of our website. So continuing to build bigger and better things. We're going to bring some official writers on. Next step after this, some more new media. But, listen, if you like what you hear, you like what you see, give us a ring, and we're happy to bring you into the family.
I think the website was such a great way for us to tie in that connection between the distribution of information of sports law, right? Like you say, we're in this sweet spot, right? When we kind of first started to really blow up, we were covering once a week as much as we possibly could. But like we said in the beginning, like there's so many things that we can't get to, and you guys are asking for us, like, what about this? This, somebody just got charged with this, contract disputes, Aaron Judge being asked on the spot about where he's going to end up. Now every Boston Red Sox fan thinks that he's going to end up in Boston, right? There's so many different things that touches sports that could be a legal issue, maybe not. So it's a good way to tie it all in. Look at our website. It's a, one-stop shop. You can read about it. You can go to another site where we aggregate from other websites that talk about it, that mention us or whatnot. So it's a great way to stay up to date on everything sports law.
I don't have anything else, Mike. My brain is fried. To get 2 episodes this week. We're working on some big stuff behind the scenes. I don't think I have any more words left to give, but all good. Let us put this episode in the books. Our one of these fun potpourri episodes. We scan, go across the board. Always fun with you, Mike. And we can put this in the books for Dan Wallach, for myself, Mike, the Conduct Detrimental family, everyone writing over at conductdetrimental.com. We will see you next time on another episode of Conduct Detrimental.